Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today, wherever you are. My name is Colin Makehamson, and I am the Assistant Director of Education for Curriculum at the National World War II Museum, broadcasting to you not from the World War II Museum, but from the comfort of my home, where a lot of you guys are right now as well. During this time, for those of you who've joined us over the last few days, the museum is dedicated to pushing out resources and highlighting content and pieces of our collection that we hope you find useful, entertaining, amusing, but also that help teachers and new teachers, parents, and students getting used to learning outside the confines of a classroom. Really how we can bring the museum to you and hopefully find a way for you to connect to World War II history, even though our museum right now you can't visit, but we're bringing the museum to you. So what we're going to highlight and showcase today are some select pieces from our museum's collection of World War II high school yearbooks. You can find these on our digital learning project, See You Next Year, High School Yearbooks from World War II, and that's at WWII yearbook.org. And I'll be navigating us there here in a few minutes. So why yearbooks? We think of World War II, we think of artifacts like tanks and planes and uniforms or oral histories from soldiers. Yearbooks today do what yearbooks back then do. They chronicle the life of a school year in a community, in a school. The most common experience in World War II was that of a civilian. There were 16 million Americans who were volunteer drafted to serve. There were 100 million back at home experiencing the war on the home front. And yearbooks are a great way that you can access the experience of high school students, faculties, communities, sometimes entire towns coming to grips with the totality of World War II. And we're going to see that World War II impacted the school lives of these young people growing up in the 1940s in many, many different ways. They're also great because they're not hard to find. I have right here my grandfather's yearbook, C.W. Makehamson. This is his college yearbook at Mississippi State University from 1943. Probably can't see it very well, but that's him, C.W. Makehamson, born in 1921, served in the Air Corps. I don't know if we see too much of a resemblance, but I'm happy to have it. It's very nice because he's got a nice inscription to my grandmother, Sarah, on the back. But the information you can find in yearbooks really can tell you a lot. They're great primary sources, very, very rich, and very, very personalized. We're going to look at some of these yearbooks, and you can really see, just like today when you pass yearbooks or ask classmates or even faculty to sign them, some of the inscriptions really reveal a lot. So we're going to look at a few of those. And again, after this webinar is over, I hope you return to our digital learning project, See You Next Year, at www.yearbooks.org and enjoy going through them further. And again, something to do while you're at home, not only looking at these yearbooks, but if you have yearbooks yourself, if your parents have yearbooks, your grandparents, take them off the shelves and see what they can tell you about the times in which they were made. This is a great lesson and a great activity to look at World War II history through the lens of yearbooks, but it's also a really adaptable lesson that you can use for almost any era. So I'm going to take us to our yearbook website, See You Next Year, High School Yearbooks of World War II, and we're going to take a look at some of these and what they can tell us about the student experience during World War II. So here we are at www.yearbooks.org, See You Next Year, High School Yearbooks from World War II. This was a collection of yearbooks that we have about 43 up here now that we put together years back. A lot of work, but it was a lot of fun to work with We have yearbooks here archived and labeled by the school name, as well as the town and state they're from as well. And they present themselves in a really fun flip book format that we're going to go to today. We're going to start with one from one of our neighbors to the west in Texas. We're going to start with Waco High School in Waco, Texas. So I was talking about the totality of the war, about how the war influenced almost everything. Well, the Texas Yearbook makes no bones, and it's not very subtle with the war's influence. On the cover, it's not the mascot, it's not a picture of the school, it's a dive bomber. And as we open up the yearbook, we can see the war is everywhere. In the cover, in the marginalia, even how they organize faculty and students. We see them, the faculty here organized in a V pattern. We see streaming fighters up at the top. We see descending parachutists at the bottom. The class poem is about victory, a V that stands for victory. It is a shining light in the greatest war in history for freedom and for right. So even though these are students, these are young people, these are not people on the front lines fighting. These are not people, in Europe or the Pacific. The war was still very, very real to them. Here in this almost Mad Magazine-like depiction, we see sort of a cartoonish depiction of what school life was like. They're united for victory. They're collecting scrap metal, as we can see here as we zoom in, which is another fun feature of the website. Having a victory bell contest, collecting fountain pens for servicemen, really, really showing that the school felt they were just as much invested in winning the war as the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines were who were serving in it. As we scroll through, again, it's a lot of fun seeing what students looked like. It's fun. Obviously, the hairstyles and clothing attire look a lot different than from today, but it's a way to sort of see yourself in it. I was in the National Honor Society when I was in high school. We see NHS here represented, and they're taking their club photos in front of planes and bombers. So really, really, the totality of the war is hard to escape. I'm going to go a little bit further in, but yeah, sports, obviously, football. Those guys must have gotten killed. Look at that. No, nothing to protect their faces, just a leather helmet. But as we get further in, this is the one I wanted to focus on. Even the advertising in school newspapers and yearbooks, they often take out ads. Here we have an ad from the Texas Power and Light Company. This sort of stylized cowboys is, yes, sir, they're flying high from Texas to Tokyo and Berlin. I'm from Texas, in the air and sea and on the land. Talk about the role that the Texas Power and Light Company is doing in winning the war. So the idea that even your local utilities, local businesses are invested in trying to win the war. So we're going to step away from Texas, and we're going to go to the state the museum's in, our home state in Louisiana. We're going to go up a little bit north to Alexandria and visit the Bolton High School yearbook. So this is the Bolton High School Bruin from 1944. And typically also, for any of y'all who have yearbooks or looking to collect these things, typically you're going to find a lot more war content, World War II content that is, from the years 1943, 44, and 45. Obviously, if it's a yearbook published in 1941, America's already on a wartime footing, but Pearl Harbor hasn't happened yet. Most of these yearbooks were published in the spring. In 42, Pearl Harbor's just been attacked, so you might find a little bit, but really the yearbooks, if you want this content, 43, 44, and 45, and even some 46 is where you'll find the majority of this highlight. So here we are in Alexandria, Louisiana, and the Bruin, and we're in dance season, prom season right now. A lot of people are missing their prom or having them virtually. I think we're all becoming Zoom, Skype, and Google Hangout experts in this. So maybe someone really, really savvy can make a Zoom prom or a Zoom dance or a Zoom graduation. But here we see the war taking over even that too, that ritual and rite of passing of the prom. Instead of having a prom court and prom king and prom queen, they have a victory court. Even the theme of the prom World War II has taken over and it has influenced. So, not a prom court, but a victory court. And then we see the campus queen and our favorite, and some of her class officers most popular and most notables as well. Also, too, it's a lot of fun to look at these yearbooks to find things you can connect yourself with today, sports, athletics, clubs, but there are also a lot of things that really have no equivalence today. Like these guys up here, we'll zoom in on them. What are they doing? Well, they're part of the Grease Club, and they're collecting old cooking oil and waste fats. Individuals, schools, and classes would collect this during the war, and they would save it, and it would be rendered. The fat and waste fats and grease would be, the glycerin would be rendered into nitroglycerin, which could be used in explosives. We also see people down here lining up to buy war bond stamps. War bonds were a very popular and patriotic way that individuals could help fund and fundraise the war. The idea that you are effectively giving Uncle Sam, the United States government, a loan that after the war is over, you can redeem, and it was very, very popular. You see them buying stamps and war bonds here as well. And like I said, this website, you can zoom in on these things. You can really get close up and check them out. You can even and slinky some of these basketball shorts these guys are wearing, satin, I guess, that made them faster. I'm not sure. So we're going to hop out from Alexandria. We're going to go to the Midwest. We're going to go to Illinois. We're going to go to Rockford to see West High School. So the West High School in Rockford, the annual is 1945. This is being published in the spring of 45. So the war in Europe ends, but the war in the Pacific continues. And in here, we're going to see a very common feature of a lot of these yearbooks, and that is dealing with the war in a more direct way. If you were a young man graduating high school, and a lot of these schools, the entire school curriculum and school calendars were influenced by the war. So instead of having one graduation or one commencement, they would have two or even three. The idea of America needs fighting men, so we want to get these men out of school and into the services. If you were a young man graduating, if you're 17, 18 years old, and didn't have a deferment or a job or a college waiting for you, more than likely you were going into the armed forces. So in these yearbooks, we often see depictions of students who are in service, but we also see a somber remembrance of students who passed away in service. One of the great things too, before we get to that, all of the inscriptions on these that we have, all written in that beautiful cursive script. You can read remembrances of classmates, just like we could do today. And in this yearbook, we're grateful because the owner took some time to even more personalize it to make it a lot of fun to go through. So these stars that we see above these students, we think of gold stars now. Some of you may remember back to elementary school. I don't know if they even do that anymore. Having a gold star by your name, it meant you've done something well or you're a good student. Gold stars in World War II meant something very, very different. It evolved from the idea of service flags, of hanging in your window of how many individuals a household had committed to the war. If the stars were blue, that meant the individual serving was still serving, still alive. If the stars were gold, it meant that person had passed away, that person had died. So these are former students. If you look at them, those are some pretty fresh faces. Those are people who are not very old, not many years past their high school graduation. We see their uniform, people in the Navy, in the Marines, in the Air Corps. And these are former students of West High School who have died, passed away in service. So Gold Star or Gold Star pages you see a lot in these yearbooks, and it's a way to pay tribute to former students and faculty from these schools who made the ultimate sacrifice, and giving them prominence of place. Literally, it's the first thing you turn to in this yearbook. They're the most important. It's not the sports. It's not how many trophies they won this year. It's these students who've died in service. This yearbook, too, being from 45, is already talking about the end of the war. The end of the war is in sight, and what are they preparing for? They're preparing for the new technology. They say that we need to uphold race equality, unselfishness, analyze numerous problems of peace, educating all of the people, economics, languages, health, fine arts. And then just like we were looking at that marginalia of the Waco, Texas yearbook with bombers and parachutists, you see at the top here, a dove carrying a sprig of some plant, an olive branch perhaps, depicting peace. This yearbook is very, very heavy in its content, its presentation. It's also great because the person who owned it did a lot of annotating. We see she's labeled this gentleman here, Roger Edwards. That was her first date with an exclamation point, so hope it went well. That's Roger there. Also some of her friends, that's Marion Crowley, an old friend. She's labeled friend, and we would see some people dressed in their military uniforms here. Dated, best of friends, and me. So this is Mary Hogg's yearbook, and that's Mary right there labeling herself. So it's a lot of fun to look at. So we're going to hop out again, and we're going to head to Topeka, Kansas, to look at the Topeka High School Sunflower yearbook. And this is from 1943 or 44. From 44. So yearbooks are a great way to see the encapsulated life of a student body. It's also a way to look at the state of the United States at that time. And relates in ways you might not otherwise think you could. So here in Topeka, some more great signatures in the sunflower. They were the Trojans. That was their mascot. So we see their mascot, Joe Trojan, is answering the call to the colors. We see these young people sort of looking at the stylized scene as something they're going to head to. So we'll go a few pages in to this yearbook, and here we go. We see something that's very familiar to us today. We see some prom royalty. That's King Bill Wall and Queen Mary Lewis. However, if we go a few more pages in, we see something a bit curious. So we just had prom royalty on that page before us, King Bill Wall and Queen Mary Lewis. So who are these people? Well, it's King Lloyd and Queen Barbara. Interesting to look at. King Bill Wall and Queen Mary Lewis, both their first names and their surname, they get a whole page individually. King Lloyd and Queen Barbara do not. In much of the United States, Jim Crow and racial segregation were the law of the land. Even here in Topeka, Kansas, at the Topeka Sunflower Yearbook, it tells us this was a school that was academically integrated, but all of its activities, extracurricular activities, were strictly racially segregated. So King Bill Wall and Queen Mary Lewis get an entire page to themselves. We don't even know we have King Lloyd and Queen Barbara. We have to scroll down to see their names here, and they have to share a page on there. And you'll see this throughout this yearbook. They have two basketball teams. They have separate activities for African American students and white students. Really sort of amplifying that hypocrisy, that great line by the museum's founder, Stephen Ambrose, that America fought the greatest racists in history using a segregated army. And segregation didn't end in the armed forces till 1948, and it was not struck down as something unconstitutional. The separate but equal is not constitutional, that is, until the 1950s. So looking for insights, you can often stumble along things that you wouldn't otherwise expect to see. Sticking with that too, we'll go to Ohio. We'll go to the Dunbar High School in Dayton. Dunbar High School was named after a 19th century poet and Dayton native of Paul Lawrence Dunbar. And this is their yearbook. Almost looks like a little pamphlet. It's very flimsy, very light. Doesn't feature much in the way of pictures, but it shows sort of the state and the absolute falsehood of the idea of separate but equal. Separate is always inherently unequal. We see that even depicted here in this yearbook. Very, very scant information, very crowded photos, nothing individualized. And again, looks more like a pamphlet than an actual yearbook. So let's go west. Let's go all the way west. We're going to go out to Hawaii, and we're going to go to President William McKinley High School in Honolulu. So we're here. We're going to look at the black and gold. It's from 1944. So again, right in the heart of World War II, when a lot of students were in service, and we see that very quickly as we go. We see again that marginalia of ships and tanks and guns and bombs. Our contributions from blood donors, war bond works, the Red Cross Salvage, and the USO. We see here a Minuteman flag being raised over the school, along with the Stars and Stripes. And schools like that were awarded those for who they sold enough war bonds they could raise those. And again, just like we saw in the Rockford yearbook, we see a dedication to students serving, and again, recognition of students who passed away in service. And this yearbook full of them. And if you notice, they're almost all Japanese Americans who've perished in Europe. Many of them serving with the 442, the 442nd Combat Infantry Regiment, Regimental Combat Team, excuse me. And we see the first Japanese American KIA right here, Mr. Joseph Takata. He was killed in Italy in 1943 and 44. Is when he graduated and then went over to serve with the 442nd in North Africa and Italy. And he's remembered here as a soldier, but also as a baseball player. He played baseball when he was in high school, and that's how him and his classmates sought to remember him. And he actually has a baseball field named after him in Honolulu today. But going through this, looking at and on. People who were formerly on the baseball diamond, football field, or in classrooms are now being remembered for their service to their country. So we're going to go to California now. We're going to go to Excelsior Union High School. And again, looking for things that you might not expect to see in some of these yearbooks. So the El Aviador, the aviator. In memoriam, several of us have gone ahead. We make tangible results of their stay with us, but only remember their warm memories of people who passed away. Excelsior in the war, they're collecting paper, practicing first aid, perhaps serving with the Victory Corps. Pictures of students, inscriptions and dedications. And then clubs, again, some we recognize, there's football on that side. Over here we see the Japanese club. And we scroll down here and we zoom in. The Japanese club was one of the largest and most active clubs at Excelsior under the direction of Miss Mary Wilson. Just before their necessary departure, the members held a large party. So necessary departure, we can break that out. Necessary meaning they had to, and departure meaning they had to go. So this little photo and that little paragraph very succinctly talks about the effects of racial panic and fear-mongering on the West Coast after the attacks on Pearl Harbor, and the inaction of Executive Order 9066, which called for the removal and relocation of over 100,000 Japanese Americans. to incarceration centers in the United States interior. People who were students here at Excelsior in the next few months were gone to Hart Mountain, Roar, Jerome, Topaz, Manzanar. And the editor says, we hope to see them all someday when the ravages of the war have vanished from the earth, and we as a student body wish them all good luck and Godspeed. So not just the battlefield claiming former students, but also racism, fear-mongering, taking these former neighbors, classmates, teammates, and sending them off to incarceration. I like this, our collection of World War II high school yearbooks for a lot of reasons. It's a great way, like I said, to look at World War II and understand it through the eyes of a student and through the eyes of a school community. But there are really special ones we have here too. And I mentioned Japanese American incarceration, and when over 100,000 Japanese Americans were, and people of Japanese descent, were incarcerated and removed to the American interior. We actually have a yearbook from one of those incarceration centers, from Roar, one of two incarceration centers in Arkansas. So imagine being uprooted from your home in the American West, you know, California, Washington, Oregon, and finding yourself in Arkansas. And they actually put together a yearbook, the resume, attempting to put some normalcy to a very abnormal situation. So we see this very contemplative looking young man, but we zoom into some of the marginalia. It's a lonely guard tower. We go further in. You can see the clubs, some of the things they were doing, but you see a lot of these barrack style accommodations that they lived in, tar paper shacks, no privacy, and very little in the way of amenities. And this is a great yearbook because you can really get a sense of what these people went through, and really a personal view into one of the great wrongs of the war. Right there, you can see those tar paper shacks that they lived in, bathed in, ate in, learned in, and lived in. And this is a really special one, and one that I use a lot. But not to get too heavy about a lot of these things. A lot of these are great resources because you get to see kids being kids, just like they are today. They all had their own personal dreams and lives, goals, you know, loves and crushes, and plans for the future that the war interrupted. But again, these are young people after all, and we're going to see that up close and personal here in the Albert Lee High School in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. This is actually a great one because it was donated to us by one of our museum volunteers, Mr. Ross Gamble, which I don't know if you're watching. If you are, Mr. Ross, thank you for making this a contribution to our collection and this digital learning project. So again, great inscriptions. Everyone decked out, even female class wearing military attire here in the Tiger. It's a great image. Look at that. These two students, you know, matriculating, graduating, as if to say they're going to go, they're going to leave to serve. They're going to go immediately into the armed forces. So some great pictures, signatures. But again, like I said, these are kids after all. And the page I want to get to concerns exactly that sort of, you know, great immaturity that these things document. So we see here a meeting of the Board of Education, and Mr. Ross, or maybe someone else, corrected the spelling of Board of Education. It's no longer Board of Education, it is Board of Education, as if to say he's done with it and he wants no more to do with it. So these are just a few of the yearbooks that you can explore. Like I said, we have over 40 of them on the website. If you're really keen to use these, we have some lesson plans, vocabulary if you want to learn the lingo of the land, of how people spoke back then. But also too, There are definitely states that we're still looking for yearbooks from. Where we are in Louisiana, the climate is especially unkind to things made of paper. So a lot of the holes we have in our collection are from the Southeast, and then also from states that had smaller populations, so yearbooks are harder to find. These are great, great artifacts you can investigate and look through on our website. They're also great things that you can still find. You can still find these things laying around in thrift stores. If you have an old school, if your school's of an old enough age, I bet your school librarian has some of these laying around. You can find them in county historical societies, in county libraries, in public libraries. And they're very, very cheap too. If we're just, if anyone wants to go acquiring for these things, it's a much easier way to acquire World War II artifacts than, I don't know, trying to purchase a B-17 or a Jeep. You can find these relatively easy online. And like I said, in a lot of thrift stores, Salvation Armies, and things like that as well. So, like I said, www.yearbooks.org, that's where you can find these things. Find a yearbook that's close to you from your home state. Find a yearbook that's very, very far away. Compare, contrast them. See how students grapple with the war. You'll see in some of these yearbooks, there's not a lot of war content at all. Perhaps the principals or teachers thought that they shouldn't dwell on such heavy material or heavy subjects. You'll see also in some of the yearbook talking about how the war is the most important thing, how they're not going to have sports, they're not going to have athletics, they're not going to have a dance or prom because they don't think it's right, and they're really, really pouring the energies and activity of the yearbook document the lives of students. So from here, I'm going to take some questions that have come in to us from those of you watching on Facebook, and I'm going to see if I can answer any of these. So this first message is, or question rather, is from Lorraine, who asks, what are some of the most common messages written in these yearbooks? I guess we can go back to the Rockford yearbook to take a look at that, since that has a lot of great signatures. So one of the most common inscriptions you see in here that may not make the most sense is because we don't really say it, it sounds really old-timey, is these inscriptions in here will say, if they don't have something verbose to say, they'll say, to a swell gal or a swell guy or something like that. Swell is just kind of shorthand for cool, all right, A-OK. So you'll see it a lot. So if you wonder what that means, it means just, all right, someone who's well-liked and someone who you want to pin a nice, succinct message to. Let me grab one more, another question. A good one from Joseph. Joseph asks, what's my favorite yearbook and why? There's a lot of them I really, really love. A lot of them I like because we know the people who donated them to us. And we know, they can point out a lot of personal things and personal stories and anecdotes that may not be evident otherwise to it. For me, I really, really love the Sunflower because it's like I said, it shows the state of the Topeka, Kansas school, but also shows the state of race relations in the country during World War II as well. So I think it's really, really special. The Roar yearbook is fantastic just because it's very unusual and unlike almost any other yearbook in our collection. But no, they're a lot of fun to work with. And again, it's a great way, not only for World War II, you can look at these and enjoy these, but when you're done, again, ask mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever's around, to pull a yearbook of theirs off the shelf. Look at it, just like we looked at these. What themes do you see? Do you see the intrusion of international events of war or big events from history interceding? Do you see evidence of the Korean or Vietnam War? Do you see, the fall of the Berlin Wall? Big events are often documented in these. And again, it's a great way um, to look at the war. All right, and I've got one more question from Phyllis, asking, did they have yearbooks at West Point? Yes, they did. All of the military service academies had annuals and yearbooks. They're really big things. They look a lot like my grandfather's yearbook, very, very weighty. So you can look through those yearbooks if you can have access to one. And see who graduated and went on to serve in World War II. Most of the American leadership and generalship, or the high generalship at least, obviously were career soldiers. Many of them served in World War I. So if you were looking to find, a picture of Eisenhower or Patton, you wouldn't pick up one from World War II. You'd pick up a West Point yearbook from the 19 teens or the early 1900s, something like that. But yes, they did. The Naval Academy, West Point, they all had yearbooks and annuals for them. All right, well, I said last, but I have more good questions coming in from Adriana. She says, what are some of the clubs that supported the war effort, like the Grease Club? We saw that in the Bruin in Alexandria, Louisiana. There were things like the Grease Club. They had scrap paper clubs, but they also had organizations that were somewhat like the ROTC is today, called the Victory Corps. And the Victory Corps was organized in 1942, and it was to give students a way to learn a skill that might be useful when they enter military service, learning drafting, navigation, first aid. They wore uniforms. They learned marching and formations. They had to perform calisthenics. It was very, very popular, especially in the South. But it was a national organization, and it prepared a lot of students to almost like a pre-course before they went into service in World War. All right, well, everyone, I want to thank you for your great questions, and taking the time to spend here with me, looking through our collection of World War II high school yearbooks. But the National World War II Museum is committed to telling the story of the American experience in World War II, but we're also committed to supporting teachers and students and to know why that war is so important and what it means today, especially in a time like this, abnormal, where we're all working and learning from home. We want to be a resource for you, for teachers, teaching virtual classrooms, students having to learn from a distance, or parents, again, who are being thrust into the roles of educators. The National World War II Museum is dedicated during this time and after, pushing out resources and making sure that we have our content available to you. And also a great way that you can learn together about World War II, but maybe even look into your family's history or the history of your school or community. So from myself, Colin Macomson, Assistant Director of Education for Curriculum at the National World War II Museum, thank you for spending your morning with me looking at our yearbook collection. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, rest of your week. And to steal a title from our yearbook collection, I hope I see you next year. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye-bye.